Hi, I'm Claire Milliken and welcome to episode 148 of Art This Week. In this week's show, Rosanna visits the Meadows and speaks with Dr. Mark Roglan about the exhibition, Diego Velázquez, the Early Court Portraits. Now for Art This Week.
We're at the Meadows Museum in Dallas speaking with Dr. Mark Roglan about the exhibition Diego Velázquez, the Early Court Portraits. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for being here.
Yes, definitely. I want to start by asking you about the exhibition itself. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
The exhibition is an exhibition on Diego Velázquez and his first 10 years as a court painter in the court of Philip IV. So it just concentrates in that time frame, which was so important because it's when he first arrives from Seville to Madrid and he becomes a painter of the king. And also we also are looking very carefully to his work as a portrait painter, which was the most important work he had to do as a painter of the king. So we brought up paintings and books and prints and other materials to explain the evolution of Velázquez, one of the greatest painters of all times, working for Philip IV, one of the greatest patrons of all times. And we see portraits basically from all the different kind of paths that cross his way, from intellectuals like Góngora, to jesters like Calabacillas, to noblemen, like the portrait from the Kimball, or the king himself, like we see in this painting from the Prado, or also in the painting from the Meadows Museum. In addition to Velázquez pictures, there's also paintings by by his workshop, which is also very interesting because we're able to learn more about how these paintings were reproduced to try to reach as many outposts of the court and the empire as possible. And also we see paintings by other artists that worked before, during, and after Velázquez's time, and we can see how all the different changes that came with Velázquez and all the different things that were inherited or were transformed by his genius.
I want to ask if you can tell us the role that the Museo Nacional del Prado played in actually completing the exhibition as well.
Absolutely. We have a wonderful partnership going on with the Prado for the last 3 years. I started two and a half years ago with a loan of a very important picture by El Greco. Then continue with a wonderful loan from a Rivera painting, Giuseppe Rivera, from their collection, to which we added a number of other pictures and made a small focus exhibition on the Mary Magdalene of Rivera from the Prado. And now it continues with an even larger exhibition based in this incredible portrait that we have next to us of the full-length portrait of Philip IV in black. The Prado is our partner, is our ally in making all of this possible, so we own them everything when it comes to doing this exhibition. The curator of the exhibition is the chief curator of Spanish paintings till 1700 in the Prado, and he was the architect that was able to, find what pictures and the different items and objects that we find in the exhibition. Javier Portús, the curator of the exhibition, really wanted from the beginning not just to bring one loan, which one painting, but really try to identify a section or a part of the life and work of Velázquez that he felt where we could learn much more. And he thought that that first decade, when he first arrives at the age of 24 to work for the king, was something that he wanted to address big time. It's a moment of enormous change, in the fashion of the king and the way the king wanted to be showcased to the people. He's not only a king that is looking to look ostentatious or look like powerful, etc., but his power is reflected in a different way. He's a much more austere king. He's a king that's paying attention to his work and his boudoir and also working on his office, So he's being portrayed as a good governor. That was one of the key things that we see. And also much more austere and ostentatious when we compare it to other portraits that were done before in the court of his father, Philip III.
Can you tell us about the portrait of King Philip IV itself then?
Yeah,
if you don't mind?
Absolutely. It's a masterpiece, and it's a painting that was done in two phases. So basically there was a first portrait that was done in 1623, and it was a full-length portrait of the king himself, and there were several, it looked different than what we see now. Basically, in that first portrait, he decided, you can see even like the ghost of the lake here, he decided to put the position of the legs differently. The table, you can see it was much lower. You can see how the first hat was in a lower platform. Also, there was a cake, a clock, that was behind him that had much more presence.
That is evident. Yes.
You can see the ghost of the clock. And also, when we see the x-rays, we can also find that the hands had different positions, the paper had a different position, and of course, the head was completely different. He looked much younger. He looked as the portrait of the Meadows collection when he was portrayed in 1623. So 5 years later, he goes back, and in the same painting, he decides to make changes and to adapt it to a king that had been already 5 years ruling. So he changes the hands, and we see what we see now. He erases Prado clock, brings those two legs together, which is of incredible modernity. It's almost everything is like in one axis,
Yes.
and erases the old leg and lifts the table a little more. So he rethinks the whole portraiture and also updates the age of the king, adding a new head of a king that was a little older. So
A little more mature, maybe.
more
showing
mature.
More experience.
So it's a very interesting way of working, because basically he reused the same canvas 5 years later and did a second portrait of the king. And basically, and the answer to explain that, what Javier Portuz was telling us, is that in many ways these paintings now are perceived like fine art objects that are extraordinary, exquisite, but in that times were mostly and importantly objects. So they were used, they had they were a tool that needed to be used. So just making those changes was something that the whole painting itself was meant to be from the beginning. But it's really interesting because the way the pigments have reacted through time, now we're able to see this kind of ghost images that Velázquez never wanted us to see. And one of your colleagues asked me what would he do if he saw all of this, and I told him that probably he would just erase it and make sure that we were not able to see it.
Do you believe that King Philip was a visionary when he appointed Diego Velázquez as his court painter? Because it was pretty forward-thinking of the king at that point in time to this style of painting, correct?
It was a very bold decision, and it was unprecedented. Imagine this young artist coming, again, at the age of 24 from Seville, a very cosmopolitan city, but yet being summoned by the King of Spain. And he had the opportunity to do the portrait of the king, and he had one day to do it. And he did a painting, which now we think that's most likely the picture at the Meadows. He did that portrait, and basically he got the job. That broke all the rules of how to become first painter of the king. Usually you had to prove yourself much more and be a long time in the court and get the trust. But that tells us exactly what you just said, like how Philip IV was, when it came to art, he's one of the most extraordinary persons in history, and how he was able to make that bold decision that we all are so thankful to, which is to hire him in this spot. And between him and Velázquez, they start a journey that it's one of the most phenomenal histories in the history of art, having one of the greatest genius as an artist, working with one of the greatest patrons when it came to collecting and to appreciating art. They built together a partnership for around 40 years that is still one of the greatest stories in the history of art.
We want to thank Dr. Roglan for speaking with us. More information on the exhibition and the museum can be found at the Meadows Museum, Dallas.org. That's it for Art This Week. Thanks for watching.
I still got your Polaroid.